Good day and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are just going to be considering some aspects of physics practical. Majorly in Waec, there are some basic things they want us to do about physics practical, and it is essential we do the right thing. Otherwise, we will be penalized when we are being marked or probably marked down. Now, some of the areas that they will consider or they will check when you are doing your Waec physics. The first aspect is what we call the observation. Now, the observation has to do with your table. They want to know how well you have carried out the experiment in the lab, and much more than that, how you will be able to write down the findings, the things that you got when you were doing the experiment is also very, very important. Now, the first thing they will check is your observation. The next thing they will check is your graph. And mind you, your observation will not carry anything less than 8 marks. It ranges from 8 to 13 marks. That is what you will see, or probably that you will be marked against. For your graph, the graph is usually 6 marks in your Waec. Now we'll come in this class, we just want to itemize some of the things that you will be marked, and so you need to pay attention to them. The third one has to do with your slope, and your slope basically is just a maximum of 2 marks. But your slope is needed in some other areas, like number 4 in your deductions. In your deductions, they will check it may be based on your slope, which is also your deduction is 1 mark. Sometimes intercept will also be factored into whatever it is you have done. The intercept is still 1 mark. And there's also one particular aspect that you usually not see in your question paper. That aspect is called accuracy. Now, the accuracy aspect is also 1 mark. Now, after that particular aspect, they will talk about the 7th part, which is your precaution. We talk about your precautions. Your precaution is basically what? 2 marks. Now, the 8th thing they will check is your short questions. Now, your short questions is actually the part B aspect of your experiment, and usually it will not carry anything less than what? 4 marks. The main report, as it were, that they expect you to write from here to this side, majorly we carry 21 marks. 21 marks out of the 25 marks for the question. Remember that in your physics practical, it is expected that you are to answer 2 questions out of the 3 questions that you'll be given. And out of that 2 questions, a question is 25 marks each, and a maximum mark is expected of you in the exam. Now, we will not go through all the aspects because we will still have time, and because I also don't want this particular video to be too long. So we'll consider just only the observation aspect in this class. And in our subsequent classes, we'll do justice to the other aspect of how we write down our experimental physics report. Now, in the area of your observation, now your observation will be classified basically into 2. The first part is what we call your fundamental observation, and the second part is what we call your derived observation. Now, your fundamental observation is the aspect of your practical that has to do with the things that you measure. Now, the things that you measured has to do with something like when you take measurement of your meter rule, or remember that in your physics, when you started physics, there's what we call fundamental quantity and derived quantity. Now, some of your fundamental quantities, as it were, your fundamental quantities, as it were, when if you did your physics very well, they will talk about your time. They will also talk about your length. They will talk about your mass. They will also talk about your temperature. They'll talk about the temperature and so on and so forth. Now, things like this, when you measure them in physics, electric current is also part of some of the things that are considered as your fundamental what observation. And remember that the unit for this one is seconds, while the unit for this one is meter, this one is kilogram, this one is Kelvin, and this one is ampere. Another aspect that is also considered to be vital is your what? Your volt what? Meter what? Reading. Your voltmeter reading, and this is measure what? Whatever you get is measured in volts. Basically, what this thing is all about, your fundamental observations. What we call fundamental observations are those readings that you get from whatever device that you use. So, for example, you measure time, you would have used a stop clock, a stopwatch, and so on and so forth. Or maybe you are measuring length in the lab, you would have used your meter rule to also get the value. Or for your mass, you would have used different medium that is used to measure mass to also carry out that. While for your current, you use your ammeter, and for your voltage, you also use your what? Voltmeter. Things that you get from a device are actually what we call the fundamental what? Observations. And in Waec, they expect that when you take your reading, every reading you make from this aspect must actually be measured, to at least one decimal what? Place. Now that is actually what WAEC is after. The decimal places of whatever it is that you are doing is basically what WAEC is after, and you need to pay attention to that. Now quickly, if we consider the second part, which is the derived what? Aspect. Now, in your derived what? Observations, what we are looking at in your derived observation actually has to do with those things that you did not get from your measuring device, but are actually part of the question that you are given. For example, in an experiment, they may ask you to find the log of period. Now remember that there is no device that you will use to measure even period as it were. So when you are taking the log of anything, that is anything you do with the aid of your calculator during your physics practical, is actually what we call what? A derived what? Observation. Now some of the things that you are going to be asked under this place has to do with things like your period, when you are looking for your period in physics practical, when you are looking for the reciprocal of functions, are looking for reciprocal of functions, you are looking for the trigonometric what? Functions as well, are considered under your derived what? Observation. Trigonometric functions, something like your reciprocal, for example, you have something like the inverse of what? Y. That is what we mean by reciprocal. While your trigonometric functions, some things like sine theta, sine t, etc. While you also have your logarithmic function, and this has to do with uh, functions like the log of probability, maybe the log of y, as the case may be, depending on the question that you are asked in your exam. So even in this part, you can also consider multiplication functions, functions multiplication functions such as probably you have t squared, that is like t times what? T. Division also is also considered. Now under your derived what? Under your derived observation, WAEC expects that your reading or your evaluation should be measured or calculated to at least three decimal places or three significant figures. But I would suggest that when you do your experiment, you should always leave your own in four what? Decimal what? Places, or four significant what? Figure, to be on a safer what? Side. To be on a safer side. So basically, I suggest, or what I tell my students to do every time they are writing their values, that anything that falls under their derived observation should be recorded in four decimal places, and anything that falls under the fundamental observation, they should do it to what? They should record it to what? Two what? Decimal what? Places. Now these are the things that will be considered under observations in the physics. Now remember that these words or whatever it is we have on the board is just to give us an idea of what is being done. Because usually your whatever it is you have written down will be marked in the form of a table. Now, in the form of your table, there are various things that Waec wants to check. When you are writing your table, there are various things Waec wants to check. Let's assume that you are given a typical light experiment, for example, or sorry, a typical electricity experiment, for example. You have various values to read. The value of your current in ampere, the value of your voltage in what? In volts. And probably you also have the inverse of your what? Current and the inverse of your what? Volt. Now, if everything that you are asked to tabulate is on your table, WAEC usually used to give you a bonus mark, what they call what? A composite what? Table. Now, a composite table means that everything that you are given in the question, they are all written together inside what? One table. Peradventure, in the process of writing your table, you notice that this part will not be able to enter, and you now have to come down to another part of the what of the table. Let's assume that you notice that you have one small space somewhere here, and you now decide to do something like this, and you write your inverse of voltage here. Now, this is not seen as a composite table because there's already a space in between these two. It is seen as two separate what table. So the mark for the composite table will be scored what? 0 or marked down in the part of what? That composite table. So I will suggest before you rule your table, check that the space you have will be enough so that you will be able to fix everything together in just one what? One point. So for the part of your composite table, everything is expected to be written what? Together, in order for you not to lose what? That mark. Now, when you have written all the headings, it is expected that for every fundamental what observation, for every fundamental observations you have, it is expected of you to put your what? Your units. Like in this place, if you did not put your unit, you will be marked down. If you did not put your unit here, you will also be marked down because these are fundamental observations and their readings were obtained from a measuring device. Now, in this place, if you did not put your unit, it's expected that you put the unit, but if you did not put it, Waec will still pardon you because it is what? A derived what? Observation. You did not get the reading of your what? Inverse of I from your measuring device. You used your calculator to evaluate what? This set of what? Of values. Now, another thing they need to check, for example, they give you various values for current. You have something like 2.00, 4.00, maybe this one is 6.00. You now come here to write 8.0 and probably what? 10.0. Now, for your voltage, you have maybe 10.0. Now, let's say this is 15.0, 20.0. Then here you came back here to write maybe 30. You have a 40, and so on and so forth. Now, there's what they also call what? Inconsistency in writing your findings. Now, in Waec, they will mark these three and they will fail these two. Why? Because they will say what? Your values are not what? Consistent. Meaning, if you decide to use what? If you want to use two decimal places, you must stick to your what? Two decimal places what? Throughout the what? Table. From the beginning to the end, it has to be in two decimal places. If you are using one decimal place, you have to stick to your one decimal place. So for your values has to be what? Consistent throughout. Like in this case, if I put decimal point, this one is what? Consistent because the decimal place is what? The same throughout. So they will be given the adequate what? Mark here. Remember, like I said before, under your derived observation, which are your what? Reading or evaluations measured or calculated to, it must be calculated to at least three decimal places or three significant figures. It is very essential that whatever you do should be done to at least 4 decimal place, like I used to tell my students. But if you don't want to do it, Waec marking guide usually stipulate what? 3 decimal place or what? Or three significant what figures. So I always advise my students to leave their own in 4 decimal places. Like in this case, the reciprocal of 2 should be giving us what? 0.5. That is 1 over what? 2 to give us 0.5. I will expect my students to write what? 0, 0, 0 to make it what? 4 decimal places. And when they do the calculations for all this, I will advise them to maintain the decimal places what? From top to down, and what they have done here is also what they will do here at this point. In this case, we have what 1 over what 10. That will give you what 0.1. So this will give you 0.1000. So whatever it is you have done, you have to do it and make sure that what you maintain it down. If you can obey this simple what, if you can obey this simple decimal point as significant true in whatever it is you are doing, then you should be able to do well in your physics practical as it has to do with the observation. Remember that observation is not just the only thing we have. We also have the graph aspect, the slope, the deduction, the intercept, the accuracy, the precautions, and the short question what aspect of it. So for today, we have just considered what the observation what aspect of what of it. And in our subsequent class, I will go through probably the graph and show you how to what plot a graph, especially with the aid of what of a calculator. If you do like what you have what watched and seen, I would suggest that you watch the video over again so that you understand the concept that is playing, that is being what passed across to you. And if there's anything or any question you have, you can put it in the comment what section and I will attend to it. And also do well to subscribe to the channel. See you in our next class. Thank you.